Rockets. They didn't start in space. Well, they started here on Earth. Well, no duh, huh? Well, rockets actually started as weapons because for some reason, humans like killing other humans. Today, rockets launch satellites, send astronauts into orbit, and one day might take humans to Mars. But this technology has a long way and a fascinating history. So let's take a deeper look and find out how we went from launching spicy boomsticks at each other to sending people to space on bigger, spicy boomsticks.
Artemis 2 now bound for the moon.
The year is 1232 CE. Chinese armies used what were called fire arrows, but for convenience sake, I will call them spicy boomsticks. These were simple yet effective rockets that were powered by nothing but gunpowder and hopes and dreams. These were generally launched during battle, and while they were very primitive and not very complex, they were considered the first true rocket in history. It is now the 1400s, and Europeans now have acquired spicy boomsticks. Kazimierz wrote about rocket designs in his book, The Great Art of Artillery. He described certain rocket designs like multi-stage rockets and fin stabilizers, and some of the concepts he described are still used in modern rocketry today. It is now the 1700s, and our man Sir Isaac Newton has decided that rockets need to be better. Using Newton's laws, in 1720, a Dutch professor named William Gravesand built model cars propelled by jets of steam. Rocket experimenters in Russia and Germany began working on rockets that weighed more than 45 kilos. Some of these rockets were so powerful that their exhaust flames acted like drills, boring deep holes in the ground before they finally lifted off. It is now finally the modern rocketry era. In the year 1898, a Russian schoolteacher named
Konstantin Tsiolkovsky
proposed the idea of going to space by riding on a rocket. Wow, what is up with these school teachers, man? Like, dang. He suggested the use of liquid fuel for rockets in order to achieve a greater range. Little did he know, this would lay down the groundwork for more technologically advanced rockets later down the road. In 1926, the first liquid-fueled rocket was finally made. Robert H. Goddard launched the first liquid-fueled rocket, which went a whopping 12.5 meters high. Goddard's experiments with liquid-fueled rockets continued for many, many more years, and his rockets became bigger and flew higher. He even developed a scientific gyroscopic system for better flight control and a compartment for scientific instruments and/or payloads. And if that wasn't enough, this absolute Chad also made the parachute recovery system, and for his amazing work, he was called the father of modern rocketry. It is now the 1930s, and we have downgraded from space travel back to trying to kill each other. A German group called the Vereinfachverkehr began experimenting with spicy boomsticks in Germany. Before Hitler came to power, the group requested funding from the German army, as rockets were one of the very few military developments restricted by the Versailles Treaty at the end of World War I. For 3 years, the group launched increasingly more powerful and dangerous rockets from an abandoned ammunition dump site. One of their most powerful rockets reached an altitude of just over 1.5 miles, or over 1 kilometer. Although the research and testing was mainly too well, it led to many major technological advancements for rocketry. 1942. And Germany launched its first ballistic missile. It was the first of its kind and was a long-range guided missile and was the first human-made object to ever reach the edge of space. After the war was over, the United States of America and Soviet Union captured the scientists responsible for the rocket's creation. It is now 1945, and good news, World War I has finally ended. Bad news, the space race has started. The space race was a race to get to space. What do you expect? But anyways, it was between the great land of oil and the Soviet Union. The space race had some very important events that transformed modern rocketry, which include 1957, Sputnik 1 was launched. The Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first artificial satellite to orbit Earth, also marking the start of the space race. The same year, the Soviets launched Sputnik 2 with Laika, the dog on board. Laika became the first living creature to orbit Earth. Unfortunately, Laika died just a few hours after launch. In 1958, the US realized they should probably do something, so they founded NASA, or the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, responsible for civilian space exploration, aeronautics, and space-related research. In 1961, the Soviet Union launched Vostok 1 with Yuri Gagarin on board, who became the first human in space. But this time, he didn't die during his mission, something that may happen again in the future. In 1961, the US astronaut Alan Shepard became the first American in space. Later that month, President John F. Kennedy would make the bold claim that the US would land on the moon before the end of the decade. In 1962, John Glenn became the first American to orbit Earth. In 1863, Valentina Shevcheva became the first woman in space. In 1965, the first spacewalk was done by Aleksey Leonov. And in 1967, Apollo 1 was launched. Unfortunately, the astronauts Virgil Grimson, Ed White, and Roger Caff were killed in a fire during a launch pad test. Following the incident, the Apollo program was delayed for 18 months. Jumping ahead to July 20th, 1969, the first humans landed on the moon, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on Apollo 11, which is where Neil Armstrong famously quoted,
"It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind."
The year is now 1971, and the Soviet Union has launched Salyut-1, which was the first space station. It marked the beginning of a long-duration human inhabitation in space and created technology that would be used in the International Space Station. Unfortunately, all members of the second crew of Salyut-1 tragically died of asphyxia during re-entry, making them the only humans to have died above the Kármán line. After the deaths, the mission Salyut-1 was terminated and the station was burnt up in the atmosphere. In 1981, NASA launched the Space Shuttle Columbia, marking the start of reusable aircraft, transforming space missions and making them more efficient. This is probably one of the most iconic space shuttles you've ever seen, and it flew until 2003, conducting 28 missions and paving the way for more routine orbital operations. It is now 1986, and Space Shuttle Challenger is about to take off on designated STS-51L, and is the 10th flight for the orbiter and the 25th flight in NASA's Space Shuttle program. The crew was supposed to deploy a commercial communication satellite as well as study Halley's Comet while they were orbiting the Earth. They were also supposed to take a school teacher up into space under the Teacher in Space project. What is up with the space and teachers, bro? Unfortunately, let's just say it didn't go exactly to plan. 73 seconds after takeoff, Challenger received a rapid, unscheduled disassembly, killing all 7 crew members. What you are now witnessing is the equivalent of the metaphorical crap hitting the metaphorical fan. The vehicle disintegrated 14 kilometers above the Atlantic Ocean. The incident resulted in a 32-month pause in the Space Shuttle program and President Ronald Reagan to create the Rogers Commission to investigate the accident.
Looks like a couple of the solid rocket boosters blew away from the side of the shuttle in an explosion.
It is now 1989. The International Space Station has started construction, marking it as one of the first permanently crewed modular spacecraft and research laboratory that is in planetary orbit around Earth. It is a huge symbol of collaboration among space agencies and served as a platform for scientific experiments, technology demonstrations, and international cooperation in human spaceflight and habitation. 2010. Space exploration has come so far, hasn't it? It's come so far that private companies can now launch their own space shuttles, and in 2010, SpaceX did exactly that. In 2010, SpaceX launched Falcon 9, which orbited Earth 2 times before landing in the Pacific Ocean. This marked the first private launch into Earth orbit. And in 2011, NASA launched Juno on a 5-year journey to Jupiter. It arrived in orbit and around Jupiter in July of 2016 and has been sending back valuable data since. In 2012, SpaceX launched the reusable rocket Falcon 9 on its first commercial mission. This rocket was launched on a path to the International Space Station for a resupply mission. And finally, in 2026, NASA launched Artemis 2, the second part to NASA's mission to send people to live on the moon. In this step, NASA launched this group of astronauts on a 10-day mission to leave the orbit and fly by the moon for the first time in over 50 years. Once they left orbit, they circled around Earth a few times and used it as a slingshot, propelling them to the moon. They flew by the far side of the moon, getting as close as just 4,067 miles from the surface. Then they started their journey home, using the moon as another slingshot before re-entering Earth's atmosphere at over 24,000 miles per hour before finally touching down in the Pacific Ocean.
Splashdown confirmed.
Copy splashdown, waiting on VLDR.
Splashdown confirmed at 7:07 p.m. Central Time, 5:07 p.m. Pacific Time. From the pages of Jules Verne to a modern-day mission to the moon, a new chapter of the exploration of our celestial neighbor is complete. Integrity's astronauts back on Earth.